Welcome to Gold Derby's Meet the Experts TV documentary panel. I'm senior editor Denton Davidson, joined by Prentice Penny for Black Twitter, A People's History, Amanda McBain for Girl State, Galila Bekele for Maxine's Baby, The Tyler Perry Story, and Christopher Burke for Love and Life, No Ordinary Campaign. Thank you all for joining me. I love the diversity of these projects. I laughed, I cried, I learned. It's political, it's Hollywood. There's a lot going on here. So since documentaries are all encompassing, I'd love to ask, each of you, starting with you, Prentice, as someone who comes from a lot of fictional comedies, what excites you about documentary filmmaking? Like, what really brought you into this field and said, I want to do that?
I think getting deeper into the thing that you're talking about. For me, obviously, when you're doing something fictional, you're trying to tell a story, whether it's in TV or movies. Mine has mostly been television, and you're trying to think about this character, and you're thinking about that character, and you're trying to progress the story. But you always know, like, you have to keep it moving in a certain way. And I'm someone who loves wormholes a lot. And so to be able to think that I think I know what the story is, and then to go deeper and deeper in a way that sometimes you're just not able to do just with the time and the budgets you have. When even, I know that sounds crazy coming from scripted, but you have a date in which you're trying to deliver something by, something has to air by a certain time. And doing this doc was the first time I had done something for 2.5 years of my life that was kind of pretty all-consuming of what I was working on. And so to be able to just get deeper, deeper, deeper into something where that's your only focus. I don't know. I just thought so many special things came out of that. Things I didn't think were the story became the story. Things I thought, oh, I think I know what this is. This isn't as interesting as this. And that's been my biggest love. I was like, man, I wish I wouldn't like love this. There's not a ton of money in it to provide for my family, but the fulfillment out of it, I has been fulfilled almost as I've done anything else in my life. It's really been special.
And Amanda, how do you continue to find subjects you're passionate about in this world of endless topics? What catches your eye? And then, how long does it take to say, like, all right, I'm really gonna commit to this? Because once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, I think you have to be willing to spend at least 2 or 3 years of your life with those people. You're basically inviting them into your dinner table. I mean, and this is literal because I worked with my husband too, so we are constantly talking about this stuff. I think what Prentice said is true. Like, I really do want to be surprised. I'm really kind of learning still with every film. I think so. I can't really say what at any given moment is what I really want to be working on. But for sure, with these last two Girl State and Boy State films, I think the state of our country and the sort of division in our country was something we wanted to investigate, but we're so overwhelmed by the amount of media about, or particularly news media, and the sort of traumatized by it, really, the nastiness of politics. So I think we wanted to find some other way to get into talking about it and working on it. And then we had these children too. So it was sort of like, that one seemed like a no-brainer, even though neither of us knew about this program. I kind of read this silly article in the Washington Post at some point about how the Texas guys had seceded from the Union. That's what they had done that year in their legislation. We thought, well, that's funny, but it's also like, it's a little bit, like, what does it say? Where are we at? And I think that is what you start with, and then you sort of scratch that itch, and then hopefully you find people that, for me, is who will teach me something. And every single film I've made connections with people who are very, very different from me, who always end up teaching me a lot about myself, about my world, all of it. So that's the hope.
And Galila, what's it like for you? Like, what inspired you to really get into the documentary side of things? And also, what is it like to be a filmmaker making a film about a filmmaker? I mean, that's kind of an interesting dynamic.
Yes, it's nerve-wracking. How do you paint a painter, right? And show the piece afterwards. It's very hard. For me, documentaries changed my life. I'm a third world kid. I remember watching the film Hoop's Dream, although I've never been to America when I watched it, and I never played basketball, but it spoke to me in a way that you can come from certain circumstances and still dream and work hard. And it just really spoke to me the same way Senna, the documentary, spoke to me. And it also, like, it opened my mind that not everything has to be scripted to be to deserve a space of beautifully shot cinematic experience. And, with Tyler, I think, you can start a film with a loving gaze, but still hold a space for a nuanced kind of way of telling the story and really diving deep. And although I thought I've known him for many years, there's so much I didn't know. I think often our loved ones hold back information so we don't get traumatized by the story they're telling us or view them in a certain way. Or also in this case, when you're talking to someone about abuse and trauma, you still have to go into it with a very soft approach. It's not natural to stick a camera and follow someone every day for 10 years. So even vulnerability with people that we've known all of our lives, the day they tell you, the landing pad has to feel soft, and, although this is a story about my, the father of my child, he's still dreaming. He's still designing his imagination and making it come true. I was 4 months pregnant when I started filming him. Our son is 9, and he was old enough to ask his father, "Why do you work so hard, Papa?" Right? And it's also a story about 3 generations of 2 men and a little boy. The fatherhood aspect. Tyler's experience from the father figure is so opposite to what he's giving his son. So like the question about do we come with love in our heart, or is it taught? Like so many different questions. So to answer your question fully, documentaries reach so many people, films, art reach so many people. And as frivolous as it seems to be, talking about art at this moment with so much is going on in life, I do know sometimes these creative outlets is how we let the poison out, how we speak to each other. So that's why for me.
And Christopher, like Galila, you're making a film about someone that you know. So you've made plenty of documentaries. What first pulled you into that world of that having that interest to make documentary film? And then what is the biggest difference about making a film with the subject that you're very close to?
Yeah, I think, the Prentice made a point earlier about wormholes or rabbit holes that we like to go down. And that's definitely the way I am. I've always been really inquisitive. I love just going really deep on stuff and figuring out all kinds of arcane details. But then with documentary, you also have to then sort of distill it down and figure out how to get it on screen in a way that people are going to watch, that's entertaining and engaging. So that's been a really fun challenge for me. And I just love that about this line of work. And in terms of this one specifically, my old friend asked for help and I showed up, and this is what I got. I think sometimes we try to choose projects, but this one chose me more accurately. And I just felt like as soon as I looked at this, I couldn't look away. And there were a lot of really hard moments where it would be tough enough no matter what, even if you sort of have like a little bit of journalistic detachment. But when this is a guy you've known for 20 years and, there's a moment where Brian testifies in Congress, and then he comes out into the hallway and he breaks down crying. And I was just there with the camera walking backwards, hoping I didn't trip and trying to capture the essence of what he was going through, when I really felt like I should be putting the camera down and giving him a hug, because as a human being, that's what you want to do. And we actually talked about it at the end of a really awkward, long walk down a hallway. And I said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I feel like I shouldn't be shooting." And he looked at me through his tears and said, "No, you absolutely should be shooting. You're doing your job. I'm doing mine. That's why we're here." And it was really tough. And there were a lot of moments like that. But we're trying to capture something that can move the needle for people with actual life and death subject matter of neurodegenerative disease. And so there's going to be some hard moments, and you just kind of got to figure out how to get through those and come out the other side.
And just to maybe reverse the order a little bit, and Chris, stay with you. When you're working on this subject, documentaries, you don't have a script. You're not following a specific script. How do you know this is what I'm cutting? This is it. I have to stop. We have to put some sort of film out. And particularly when I'm thinking of your film, he goes and speaks at Congress, and that would have been great. But then he goes back. You couldn't have known he was going to go back. I mean, there's incredibly huge moments that you could have known were coming, and maybe more are coming. And so at some point you have to say, well, we have to stop. What is the most difficult part about that?
I mean, just what you said, you never know when to stop. And especially with something, in our case, a story of legislative and funding successes coming one after another at the federal level, while also a guy with ALS is fighting for his life and losing more and more physical ability every day. That was a really hard thing to figure out. And honestly, what the thing that the forcing mechanism for us to stop was that we needed to premiere at a film festival. So we did, and then luckily we had some epilogue cards that we've been able to update and that have been updated a little bit more for the release on Prime Video, that detail some more of the further successes that have happened. But I think one of the big lessons and messages that I'm trying to get out there with this film is the idea that, yes, they've had this great trajectory in a few years of making big changes in the landscape of ALS, but they are just getting started. Not just Brian and Sandra, but the entire community that continues to grow. And that's been a really amazing thing to witness. And yeah, in our case, it was just, we had to stop. Otherwise, it would have been very tempting to keep going.
And Galila, for you, I mean, I think you followed him for about 10 years or something, which I'm sure he must have loved. But you could have gone on forever. I mean, he's still making history. He's still thankfully very much here. So at one point, do you say, I mean, all right, this is the film we're going to make for now anyway, regardless of where his legacy takes him from here?
Yeah, I mean, we thought we were finished when the grand opening of the Fort McPherson studio was, when it opened. We're like, okay, this is the finale, studio's open. And then a few months later, pandemic hit. So of course, Tyler being Tyler, he created a whole formula to kind of start production again. And also what was happening around Atlanta, all of these things. So you kind of intuitively continue. It's hard to say when to stop. The best way I can explain it, even with my past films, is there's an intuition that sort of kicks in that says, okay, this might be enough for now. There's always in the back of your mind, like going back to film even years later to kind of see for your own self what's happened, what impact, what's going on, what changes have happened. But I also realize that sometimes when you release something, it takes a life of its own. And I think about young people who are in similar circumstances, who come from similar backgrounds, or even people who are entrepreneurs, young people who want to start something, can see this film and be inspired by this man who created his own formula. Even looking at I didn't know the deal he made, the 1090, which set precedent for so many other TV shows that came after him. That itself is so inspiring. If I was an entrepreneur watching that, I would get a sort of like a boost of energy to keep going. I also think about him looking at his life, and like sometimes we don't look at what we've done, we just keep going, right? And kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, this is what I've done, what could I change? So again, it could have been a film we continued for 20 years. I am one of those crazy people who will follow someone for 10, 12 years and find out what life has come to, because that's how life is. And I think documentary is so hard to have a deadline and set date, and having the privilege of time also helps you kind of reveal more of what the story is.
Well, Amanda, for you have a little bit different of a situation because you do have a finite time. You have to get the right shots in a week that you're allowed to be there for Girls State. So what is that pressure like? And then how long do you spend after that, sort of doing, wrap up interviews and before you're able to say you're ready to finish this film?
I mean, I kind of liked that Having the limitations was freeing in a lot of ways. We've made longitudinal films, and it's true. I mean, their lives keep going. So maybe there should be some film of someone's life that really is Truman Show beginning to end. I mean, I feel that impulse each time. So it was really nice to have the kind of guardrails of. That being said, we also had the pressure of, I've been on fiction sets too, you have this to get your movie. And what matters then for us is finding the right people to follow going into that event, casting properly, right? Because gosh, you don't want to go through that event and think you've cast wrong. Because we needed to find kids who are going to do well in the program. So they had to be smart and politically savvy and passionate and the whole thing, but then also vulnerable enough to share themselves with the screen. And for a 17-year-old, that's a lot to ask of somebody. So we spent a long time finding the right people to follow. And then you cross your fingers and hope something good happens and that you're there. So we have this 30-person crew to be sure we're there for the moments that matter. But yeah, the high pressure was kind of fun, scary, terrifying, awesome. I love it.
And Prentice, how about you? How do you know when to call it quits? And then how did you decide this is going to be 3 episodes?
Well, we thought it would be 3 episodes. I didn't know at first. The article was actually in 3 episodes, but the article was written in 2021. So the article stopped at January 6th. None of the other things had happened. We didn't start filming, we were prepping, but we didn't start filming it until around March of last year. So much had been, changing on the platform, obviously. But for me, I didn't know what the story was going to be. And it really was, as I saw the article being laid out, I was like, what's the narrative, right? It's this sort of weird amorphous thing. So it really came down to, as I kept reading it, it felt like a coming of age story, which I go as a filmmaker, I'm like, as a 3-act structure, I understand that. And I understand that there are these fun early days of what we would often reference Star Wars as like our reference points, the original Star Wars, not the other stuff. But we'd reference, New Hope is like Luke is new. He doesn't really know anything about the Force. He's like learns what a Jedi is. He learns what this is. And then sort of the main adult thing that happens to him is Obi-Wan gets killed. And for us, that was Trayvon Martin. It's like Black Twitter's having this fun time and we're live tweeting and having all these fun. And then Trayvon happens and it takes Black Twitter into more adult conversations, more adult things as the Empire and obviously eventually, stepping into, Black Twitter, just like we talked about Luke, stepping into their own power and responsibility and their own strength, right? And we didn't know we'd have an emperor like Elon Musk at the time, who was sort of the final boss that Black Twitter would have to go up against. But in terms of knowing when things are done, it was tricky because Elon bought the platform right in the middle of us shooting interviews. So we're having to now adjust to well, how does this change the story? Who do we need to talk to now? And it didn't change the coming of age story. That was, but it had you're watching him dismantle the platform in real time, fire people, hate speech goes up. He lets certain people back on the platform. He's dismantling it. And we have to now kind of start to figure out, again, how does that affect our story? Who do we need to talk to? And we were, really grabbing so many things up in it'd be like every week as we're in post, trying to color the film. He does this now, he does that now. At a certain point, you're just like, okay, we just have to end it because, we just kept waiting. Is Twitter really about to close up shop? That was a real thing we were also just holding for. Is this platform literally about to end? And one of the things that we weren't able to get in that I was like, I wish we could have got this in was the EU was banning the platform as a part of all of its hate speech. And they were just like, we're no longer going to necessarily we're going to put more guardrails in and really decide if X will even exist in the EU. And that was a thing that I was like, man, if that's an interesting thing, because that takes a lot of things into a whole different area. And obviously we've seen the way TikTok is going in front of Congress and all these other things, but it really was we got to turn the film in, guys, as a deadline, but we probably could have kept going. But yeah, that was really weird, watching the platform literally be changed in real time.
Well, I could keep going too, but we have to turn this in. And I want to thank each of you. I mean, what a great year for documentary films. I want to thank Prentice Penny of Black Twitter, Amanda McBain of Girl State, Galila Bakela of Maxine's Baby, The Tyler Perry Story, and Christopher Burke of For Love and Life, No Ordinary campaign. Thanks to each of you for joining our TV documentary panel today.
Thank you.
Thank you.